Royal Guard calls the SOS. After Princess Charlotte screams, "Don't take me to the basement." The royal palace stood tall and majestic, nestled in the heart of the kingdom, where it had served as a symbol of power and tradition for centuries. The grand hallways echoed with the footsteps of servants, guards, and nobles as they went about their daily duties. Every day felt like a dance of routine, a rhythm that kept the palace running smoothly. It was a place of luxury, but also of responsibility, where every movement had meaning and every word was carefully chosen. Among the palace staff was Sir Thomas, a young and dedicated royal guard. He had served the kingdom for several years and had become well known for his unwavering loyalty to the royal family. Sir Thomas was the kind of man who took his responsibilities seriously, always alert and prepared for whatever came his way. He wasn't just a guard. He was a protector, someone who kept an eye on every corner of the palace, ensuring that all was in order. He had seen it all, from the endless stream of diplomats visiting the royal family to the quiet nights when the only sounds were the ticking of the palace clocks and the soft rustle of leaves outside. On this particular evening, Sir Thomas was assigned to watch over Princess Charlotte. It wasn't a difficult task, as the princess was known for being calm and composed. She enjoyed reading, spending time in the royal gardens, and having quiet conversations with her attendants. It was a peaceful existence, and Sir Thomas felt a sense of pride knowing that he was entrusted with her safety. He had always admired the princess for her intelligence and kindness, but he never let his guard down. In his world, even the most ordinary evening could turn dangerous in the blink of an eye. Princess Charlotte had always been a free spirit, someone who didn't always fit the typical mold of a royal. She was kind-hearted and deeply empathetic, but she also had a rebellious streak that made her stand out. She would often sneak out of the palace for walks in the garden, her maid desperately trying to keep up with her. While most royals adhered to strict traditions and formalities, Charlotte would laugh and chat with the common folk, her face lighting up with joy. She was the kind of princess who was loved by the people, not just because of her royal status, but because of her genuine nature. That evening, the princess was supposed to be enjoying a quiet night in her chambers, but Sir Thomas could sense that something wasn't right. As he patrolled the halls of the palace, he noticed a strange stillness in the air. The usual noise of the servants preparing for dinner and the soft chatter of the palace staff seemed to have disappeared. It was as if the entire palace had suddenly fallen silent, and the only sound that could be heard was the faint echo of his own footsteps. When Sir Thomas arrived at Princess Charlotte's chambers, he was greeted by a sight that was unusual for her. The princess was pacing nervously in front of the window, her hands wringing a piece of cloth. Her face was pale, and her eyes darted anxiously around the room as if she were searching for something, or perhaps someone. She hadn't noticed Sir Thomas standing by the door, so he hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether he should disturb her. "Princess," he called softly, pushing the door open wider. Startled, she spun around, her face softening when she saw him. "Oh, Sir Thomas," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry I didn't hear you come in." Sir Thomas stepped into the room, closing the door gently behind him. He could tell that something was troubling her, and it wasn't the kind of unease he was used to seeing from her. She usually had a calm and composed demeanor, but tonight she seemed different. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes, something he had never seen before. "Is everything all right, Princess?" Sir Thomas asked, his voice steady but concerned. The princess hesitated, glancing down at her hands. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts before speaking. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. I don't know how to explain it, Sir Thomas," she said softly. "I keep having this feeling, this terrible feeling that something is wrong. It's like there's something lurking in the shadows, something waiting for me." Sir Thomas frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "What do you mean? Have you seen or heard anything unusual?" Princess Charlotte shook her head, but her eyes still held the same nervous energy. "No, not exactly," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I keep hearing whispers, Sir Thomas, quiet voices that seem to be coming from the basement. And every time I try to ignore them, the feeling grows stronger. It's as if the very walls of the palace are closing in on me." Sir Thomas felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't show it. Instead, he stepped closer to the princess, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "I'm sure it's just your imagination, Princess," he said, trying to reassure her. The palace is safe. You are safe. But even as he spoke those words, Sir Thomas couldn't shake the sense that something was off. He had been trained to recognize danger, and though the princess's fears seemed rooted in anxiety, there was something in her tone that he couldn't dismiss. He glanced around the room, noting the silence that had settled in the palace, the absence of the usual noise of the staff going about their work. "I think I should check the palace," Sir Thomas said, his voice firm. "Stay here, Princess. I'll make sure everything is in order." Princess Charlotte nodded but seemed reluctant to let him go. "Please, Sir Thomas," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to be alone." He paused, torn between his duty and her plea. "I'll leave the door open," he reassured her, "and I won't be far." Reluctantly, the princess agreed, though her eyes still betrayed a sense of fear. As Sir Thomas left her chambers, he felt a growing unease. He moved quickly through the quiet halls, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. There was no immediate danger, but something lingered in the air, an unfamiliar tension that he couldn't shake. The further he went into the palace, the stronger the feeling became. As he reached the basement door, he froze. The whispers that Princess Charlotte had mentioned seemed louder now, almost as if they were calling to him. His instincts told him that something wasn't right. He placed his hand on the door, testing the cool metal, but before he could act, a sudden, sharp scream pierced the silence of the palace. "Don't take me to the basement!" Princess Charlotte's voice echoed through the corridors, filled with panic and fear. Without thinking, Sir Thomas rushed back to her chambers, his heart pounding in his chest. As he arrived at the door, he could hear her sobbing inside, and his hand instinctively went to the sword at his side. He knew that something had happened, something that was far beyond what the princess had imagined. With a deep breath, Sir Thomas opened the door and stepped inside, ready to protect the princess from whatever lay ahead. As Sir Thomas stood in the doorway, his heart racing from the sound of Princess Charlotte's scream, he quickly moved towards her, his footsteps echoing softly. In the quiet room, the princess was sitting on her bed, her face pale, eyes wide with fear, and her hands clutching the sheets as though they were the only thing keeping her grounded. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and she looked up at him with a mixture of desperation and relief. "Sir Thomas," she whispered, her voice trembling, "it's happening, it's real, they're coming for me, they want to take me to the basement." Sir Thomas's mind raced. The princess's fear wasn't just an anxious moment. It felt deep, like something sinister was truly unfolding in the palace. The calm, peaceful place that had always been a haven for the royal family suddenly felt heavy and oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. He quickly moved to her side, kneeling down to make sure she was safe. "Princess, you need to stay calm," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "You're safe here with me. Let me check everything, and I'll make sure no one can hurt you." Princess Charlotte nodded slowly, but her hands still trembled and her eyes darted nervously around the room. "I heard it again," she said, her voice barely audible. "The whispering, it's coming from the basement. It's as if someone is calling my name from down there." Sir Thomas's mind raced. The basement was not a place anyone went without reason. It was the deepest part of the palace, a place used for storage, but even then it was rarely visited. The very thought of something, or someone, lurking down there made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "I'll go to the basement," Sir Thomas said, his voice calm though his heart pounded in his chest. "Stay here, lock the door behind me, and don't open it for anyone. I'll return as soon as I know everything is clear." Princess Charlotte's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly, panic rising in her chest. "No, please don't go, they'll get you too. I can't lose you. You have to stay here with me." Sir Thomas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering her a reassuring smile. "I promise I won't leave you alone, but I need to make sure you're safe, Princess. Trust me. I will return before anything can happen." Reluctantly, the princess agreed, though her eyes were filled with fear. Sir Thomas turned away and closed the door softly behind him, his thoughts focused entirely on the task at hand. As he moved down the hallway, the silence of the palace weighed on him. The usual sounds of the servants going about their work, the distant hum of conversation, everything seemed to have been swallowed by an eerie stillness. He made his way toward the basement entrance, his hand brushing lightly against the cold stone walls. As he reached the door, he hesitated. The whispering, which had been faint at first, was now more distinct. It was as though the voices were beckoning him, coaxing him into the depths of the palace's dark underbelly. Sir Thomas took a deep breath and slowly opened the basement door. The air was musty, and the dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the stone staircase leading down into the darkness. He could hear the faint whispers growing louder, but there was no one in sight. It was as if the voices were coming from the very walls themselves. He stepped forward cautiously, his sword at his side, his instincts on high alert. As he descended the stairs, the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew colder and heavier, pressing in on him as if it had been sealed away for years. Sir Thomas could hear his own breathing now, louder than the whispers, but still they persisted, tugging at the edges of his mind. He clenched his jaw and continued forward, determined to uncover the source of this unsettling feeling. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement stretched out before him in shadows. It was an old, forgotten part of the palace, unused, save for the storage of old furniture, crates, and forgotten treasures. The space was vast, its cold stone floors covered in dust and cobwebs. The only light came from the faint glow of a lantern that had been left on a nearby table. The air was thick with the scent of age and neglect, and the stillness was unnerving. Sir Thomas stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The whispers were no longer faint. They were clearer now, as if someone was standing just beyond his sight, whispering directly into his ear. He spun around, his sword ready, but there was nothing, no movement, no one. It was then that he noticed the strange, ancient door at the far end of the basement. It was unlike any of the other doors in the palace, old, worn, and covered in intricate carvings. The wood was weathered, as if it had been there for centuries, but what caught Sir Thomas's attention was the strange symbol etched into the doorframe. It was a symbol he had never seen before, one that seemed both ancient and familiar, as though it had been lost to time. Without thinking, Sir Thomas approached the door. His hand hovered over the cool surface of the wood, and for a moment he hesitated. Something inside him urged him to turn back, to leave this place and never return. But the whispers, those insistent, ghostly whispers, drove him forward. He could no longer ignore the feeling that something was wrong, something beyond his understanding. As his hand made contact with the door, it swung open with a soft creak. The room beyond was pitch dark, and the whispers grew louder, more urgent. Sir Thomas's heart raced. He stepped inside, his senses alert, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something more unsettling. The ground beneath him seemed uneven, as though it had been disturbed recently. The room felt alive, its energy pulsing with an unnatural force. Sir Thomas's eyes began to adjust to the darkness, and he saw movement in the far corner. It was faint at first, but then he saw it clearly. There in the shadows was a figure, a woman. She was standing still, her back to him, her long hair flowing like a dark river, her body clothed in a tattered gown. The figure seemed to be staring at something in the distance, completely unaware of his presence. Sir Thomas's breath caught in his throat. He was sure he had seen her move, but when he stepped closer, she remained frozen, as though trapped in time itself. He took a step forward, his instincts telling him to approach with caution. As he did, the figure suddenly turned toward him, her face hidden in shadow. Her eyes, however, gleamed brightly in the darkness. They were like twin orbs of light, cold and unblinking, staring directly into his soul. "Who are you?" Sir Thomas demanded, his voice filled with authority. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, she raised her hand, and the whispers grew louder, surrounding him from all sides. It was then that Sir Thomas realized the figure wasn't the source of the whispers. The whispers themselves were coming from all around him, filling the air, the walls, the very floor beneath his feet. Before he could react, the whispers became a scream, piercing the air and sending a jolt of fear through his entire body. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest, the sound overwhelming him. In that moment he felt a presence, a force that seemed to grasp at him, pulling him into the darkness. Sir Thomas didn't think. He turned and fled up the stairs, his mind racing, his legs carrying him as fast as they could. The door slammed shut behind him as he burst back into the hallway, gasping for air, his heart still hammering in his chest. As he closed the basement door behind him, the whispers faded away, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. He leaned against the door, trying to steady his breathing. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What had he just seen? Who was that woman in the basement? And why did it feel as though someone, was still watching him from the shadows, As Sir Thomas closed the basement door behind him, the silence that followed was almost suffocating. His breath was heavy, and his mind raced with confusion and fear. He leaned against the door for a moment, trying to steady himself. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay calm under pressure, but this situation felt different. It wasn't just a threat to the princess's safety, it was something darker, something he couldn't quite grasp. Something was very wrong, and it was lurking within the palace walls. Princess Charlotte was still in her chambers, waiting for him. Sir Thomas had promised to keep her safe, but now, as he stood in the cold, silent hallway, he felt an unsettling unease. He had seen something in the basement, something beyond his understanding, and now he was unsure what to do next. The princess had trusted him, and he could not bear the thought of failing her. Taking a deep breath, Sir Thomas turned and made his way back to her room. The palace, which once felt like a haven of safety, now seemed like a maze of secrets, its halls full of shadows that whispered of dangers he hadn't even begun to comprehend. Every corner he turned seemed to lead him deeper into a mystery he wasn't prepared for. And yet he had no choice but to press on. When he reached Princess Charlotte's door, he knocked softly before entering. She was still sitting on the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for him to return. The moment she saw him, her expression softened, but there was still a trace of worry in her gaze. "Sir Thomas," she said quietly, "you're back. What happened down there? What did you find?" Sir Thomas hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to scare her further, but he also knew that she needed to understand the gravity of the situation. "Princess," he said, his voice calm but firm, "there's something in the basement, something I can't explain. I don't know who or what it is, but I promise you I'll get to the bottom of it." The princess's eyes widened. "What do you mean? Who's down there? Is it a danger?" "I don't know yet," Sir Thomas replied, "but I won't leave until I've figured it out. I need you to stay here, locked in your room, and not open the door for anyone, no matter what. Do you understand?" Princess Charlotte nodded slowly, though her brow furrowed in concern. "But what if something happens to you? I don't want to be alone in this." Sir Thomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Princess. You have me, and I won't let anything happen to you. I'll be right outside if you need me." Despite her fear, the princess managed a small, grateful smile. She trusted him, and Sir Thomas could feel the weight of that trust resting on his shoulders. He had always taken his role as a royal guard seriously, but now, more than ever, he felt the responsibility bearing down on him. He had to protect her, no matter the cost. "I won't be long," Sir Thomas said, giving her one last nod before he turned and walked out of the room, closing the door gently behind him. The palace felt eerily quiet again. As Sir Thomas made his way back toward the basement, his thoughts were consumed with the strange figure he had seen down there. The woman, standing motionless in the darkness, her glowing eyes staring into his soul. It was a vision that haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something far more sinister than he could imagine. When he reached the basement door, he stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. His hand hovered over the cold brass handle, and for a brief second, he wondered if he should turn back. But there was no time for hesitation. The princess's safety was at stake, and he had to uncover the truth. He opened the door once again, the familiar scent of musty air and damp stone filling his senses. The basement was just as dark as it had been before, the faint light from the hallway barely illuminating the path ahead. He stepped into the room cautiously, his footsteps quiet against the stone floor. The whispers had returned, faint at first but growing louder as he moved deeper into the basement. This time, Sir Thomas was determined to find the source of the voices. He followed the sound, his heart racing in his chest. The room seemed even colder than before, and as he walked further, he began to notice something strange. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift and twist, moving on their own as if they were alive. Sir Thomas gripped his sword tightly, his senses heightened. Every part of him screamed that he needed to be on guard. Something was out of place, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He approached the far corner of the basement, where the strange door had stood. It was just as he had left it, ancient and weathered, its carvings almost glowing in the dim light. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for the door once again. As his fingers brushed against the cold wood, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if they were calling to him, urging him to open the door and step inside. Sir Thomas hesitated for a moment, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The creaking of the old wood echoed through the room, and for a brief moment, Sir Thomas thought he heard a low, guttural sound, a sound that wasn't human. His heart skipped a beat, but he didn't allow himself to falter. He had to see this through. The room beyond the door was completely dark. He couldn't see anything at first, but as his eyes adjusted, he noticed a faint glow in the center of the room. It was a soft, eerie light, like the glow of fireflies, flickering and dancing in the air. The whispers were louder now, swirling around him, filling the room with a strange, unsettling energy. And then he saw her again, the woman from before. She was standing in the center of the room, her back to him, her long hair flowing in the invisible wind that seemed to swirl around her. Her glowing eyes, though hidden in shadow, still shone brightly. It was the same figure, the same presence, and for a moment Sir Thomas froze in place. But then, as if sensing his presence, the woman turned toward him, her face still hidden in shadow. She raised her hands slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. The whispers ceased and the room fell silent. "Who are you?" Sir Thomas demanded, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. He could feel his sword at his side ready, but something told him that no weapon could protect him from whatever this was. The woman didn't speak. Instead, she lifted her hand higher, as if beckoning him forward. Sir Thomas's instincts screamed at him to run, to leave this place and never return, but his feet remained rooted to the ground. He couldn't understand why, but he felt drawn to her as if her presence had a power over him. "Why are you here?" Sir Thomas asked again, his voice louder now. "What do you want from the princess?" The woman's head tilted slightly, her eyes glowing brighter in the darkness. She didn't answer. Instead, she gestured again, this time toward the far corner of the room. Sir Thomas's gaze followed her hand, and for the first time he noticed a faint shimmer in the air, like a barrier, a wall that had been hidden from view. He couldn't see what was behind it, but he felt a sense of dread rising in his chest. It was then that Sir Thomas realized the truth. This wasn't just about the princess. Whatever force was in the basement, whatever presence he had encountered, had a far greater purpose, one that involved more than just him. It was as if the entire palace had been caught in its grasp, and now he had to find a way to break free from it before it consumed everything. Sir Thomas stood frozen in place, staring at the woman in the shadowed room. Her eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, seemed to pierce into him, holding him in place with a force he couldn't explain. The silence was almost suffocating. The whispers had stopped, but the air around him felt thick, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The woman didn't speak, yet there was a sense of power in the air, an energy that made Sir Thomas's skin tingle. He had faced danger many times in his career as a royal guard, but nothing like this. This eerie, supernatural force was something he had ever encountered. His hand instinctively rested on the hilt of his sword, ready to defend himself should the need arise, but part of him knew that no blade could defeat whatever power was at play here. As he took a cautious step forward, the woman's head tilted slightly, as if she were studying him. Her gaze was intense, and though her face remained hidden in the shadows, he could feel the weight of her attention. It was unsettling, as if she were weighing his every move, anticipating his thoughts before he even had them. "You must be wondering who I am," the woman finally spoke, her voice soft and smooth, like a breeze that carried both warmth and coldness. Her tone was not threatening, but there was an undeniable sense of authority behind it. Sir Thomas hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I am wondering," he said carefully, his voice steady, though a knot of fear tightened in his stomach. "What is this place? Why are you here?" "What do you want with Princess Charlotte?" The woman's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "What I want is not of concern to you," she replied cryptically. "But what is at stake here? That is something you should understand." Sir Thomas felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something far greater than he could comprehend. "What do you mean? What is at stake?" he demanded, his voice more urgent now. The woman slowly raised her hand, and as she did, the air around them seemed to shimmer. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the very walls. The room, which had been silent just moments ago, now felt alive, as if the space itself were reacting to her presence. Sir Thomas couldn't explain it, but it was as if the room was pulsing with energy, drawing him into it. "The balance is tipping," she said, her voice becoming more intense. "This palace is not just stone and mortar. It is a place of power, a place that holds secrets, and those secrets are now being threatened. I am not your enemy, Sir Thomas, but I am here to ensure that those who seek to misuse this power do not succeed. Sir Thomas frowned, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the meaning of her words. He had spent his life protecting the royal family, ensuring their safety from physical threats, but this felt different. There was something ancient and dangerous at play, and it was far beyond the usual schemes of court intrigue or political betrayal. "The princess," Sir Thomas started, his voice trailing off as he realized something crucial. "She's in danger, isn't she?" The woman's eyes flickered with something that might have been sorrow or perhaps pity. "Not just her," she said softly. "The very foundation of this kingdom is at risk. The power that resides in this palace is not just for kings and queens. It is something much older, something that predates even the royal line. The princess is key to all of this, but she is not the only one who matters." Sir Thomas felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. He had always known the royal family's history was deep and full of tradition, but he had never imagined that the palace itself could hold such mysteries. "What do you mean? What kind of power are you talking about?" The woman's gaze softened slightly. "There are forces at work here that go beyond your understanding. Forces that seek to harness the power of this place for their own gain. The basement, the hidden chambers, the forgotten corridors, they are all part of something much larger. Something that can change the fate of this kingdom and beyond it, the world." A chill ran through Sir Thomas's veins. He had heard whispers before, rumors of ancient rituals, secret societies, and hidden legacies within the royal family. But he had always dismissed them as mere legends, things to tell around a campfire. But now, standing in this strange room with the woman before him, those whispers took on a new meaning. They were no longer just stories. They were real. "The princess," Sir Thomas repeated, his mind still focused on her safety. "What do you want with her? Why are you here?" The woman took a step toward him, and for the first time Sir Thomas noticed something in her eyes, a deep sadness mixed with a sense of urgency. "She doesn't understand yet, but she is the key. She is the one who holds the power to stop this, or to let it consume everything." Sir Thomas felt the weight of her words settle deep into his chest. He had always been a protector, always ready to defend his charge from external threats, but this was different. This wasn't just a threat to the princess's life. This was a threat to everything. "I will protect her," Sir Thomas said firmly, his voice unwavering. "No matter the cost." The woman nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You are brave, Sir Thomas, but bravery alone will not be enough. The forces that are moving against you are not of this world. You must be prepared, for what you face here will test everything you know." Sir Thomas clenched his jaw, determination burning in his chest. "I will be ready." The woman's eyes glinted with an ancient knowing. "We will see," she said softly, almost to herself. Then, in an instant, she seemed to dissolve into the shadows, her form fading until there was nothing left but the empty room. The air grew still again, and Sir Thomas was left alone, the faint hum of energy now silent. For a long moment, Sir Thomas stood in the darkened basement, his mind spinning. What had just happened? Who was the woman? And how could he protect the princess from something so much larger than himself? He could no longer deny that there was a force at work in the palace, a force beyond the royal family, beyond the power of any king or queen. And whatever it was coming. Sir Thomas had to be ready for the princess, for the kingdom, and for himself. He turned and made his way back to the basement stairs, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword tightly. He knew that what awaited him next was beyond anything he could have imagined, but he had sworn an oath to protect the princess, and he would see it through. No matter what secrets the palace held, no matter how deep they ran, Sir Thomas would fight to the end. As he ascended the stairs, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had no answers, no solutions, only a promise. And that promise was enough to drive him forward into the darkness. The next few days passed in a strange haze for Sir Thomas. After his unsettling encounter in the basement, he could hardly shake the feeling that something far beyond his understanding was unfolding inside the walls of the royal palace. Every creak of the old wooden floors, every shadow that flickered at the edges of his vision, seemed to be a reminder that danger was near. But despite the unease that gnawed at him, he couldn't ignore his duty. Princess Charlotte was his responsibility, and he had to protect her, whatever it took. The princess herself seemed to feel the growing tension. Though she had agreed to stay in her chambers, she didn't rest easy. Sir Thomas could see it in the way her eyes darted nervously to the door, the way she flinched at every noise that echoed through the palace. She knew something was wrong. And deep down, Sir Thomas knew that whatever was happening in the palace, it wasn't just about the princess. It was about the entire kingdom. Princess Charlotte had always been a bright light in the palace, a young woman full of life, laughter, and curiosity. But now there was a weight to her presence, a sadness that hadn't been there before. She had always trusted Sir Thomas, and she could see in his eyes that he was troubled, too. It pained her to see him so worried, but she didn't know how to ease his burden. One evening, as Sir Thomas sat outside her chambers, lost in his thoughts, the princess appeared at the door. She looked different somehow, more composed, yet there was a quiet strength in her gaze that he hadn't seen before. "Sir Thomas," she said softly, stepping into the hallway, "I need to talk to you." He stood quickly, giving her a respectful bow. "Of course, Princess, what is it?" "I've been thinking a lot about what happened in the basement," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "About the whispers and the woman you saw, I want to understand what it all means, what we're up against." Sir Thomas studied her for a moment, unsure how to answer. He had always protected her with his strength, his sword, and his courage. But now the threat was different. It was something beyond his control, beyond anything he had ever encountered. "You don't need to worry about it, Princess," he said gently. "I will handle it. I promised you that I would protect you, and I will not fail." The princess shook her head, her expression soft but resolute. "I know you've always kept your promises, Sir Thomas," she said, "but this is bigger than both of us, isn't it? This power in the palace. I can feel it too." Sir Thomas sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. He had been trying to protect her from the truth, from the fear that had settled in his own heart. But it seemed that she knew, as she always did, that there was more to the story. "You're right," he admitted. "This is bigger than both of us. There's something ancient, something hidden here in the palace, something that could destroy everything we've worked so hard to build." The princess's eyes widened and she stepped closer to him. "Then we must stop it. We must find out what's really going on and put an end to it." Sir Thomas looked at her, a deep sense of admiration growing in his chest. Her courage, even in the face of such uncertainty, inspired him. She was not the helpless princess she might have once seemed. She was strong, determined, and ready to face whatever came her way. "We will," Sir Thomas said quietly, his voice filled with newfound determination. "Together." For the next several days, Sir Thomas and Princess Charlotte worked side by side, trying to piece together the mystery that had taken root in the palace. They visited every corner of the royal residence, searching for any clues that might lead them to the source of the strange whispers and the mysterious woman in the basement. Though Sir Thomas had once been a solitary figure, always ready to face danger alone, he had come to realize that the princess was not just a passive bystander in this story. She was part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. And her strength, her intelligence, would be invaluable as they tried to uncover the truth. It wasn't long before they found something. While exploring a hidden section of the palace library, Sir Thomas and the princess discovered an old, dusty book tucked away in a forgotten corner. The pages were yellowed with age, and the cover was cracked and worn. But as they flipped through the pages, they uncovered strange writings, symbols and words they didn't understand. And at the end of the book, they found a drawing that made Sir Thomas's blood run cold, a depiction of the very woman he had seen in the basement. The image was identical to the woman he had encountered: long flowing hair, eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and an aura of power that seemed to radiate from the page itself. Below the drawing, there was a passage written in a language neither Sir Thomas nor the princess could read. But something about the symbols felt familiar, as though they were connected to the whispers they had heard. "What does it mean?" the princess asked softly, her finger tracing the strange symbols. "I don't know," Sir Thomas replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But this book, it feels important. Whoever wrote this knew something about the woman. They knew what she was capable of." Princess Charlotte closed the book carefully and looked at Sir Thomas. "We need to find out more. We need to understand what's happening here." The royal guard nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. He had always known that danger could come in many forms, but this was something entirely different. It wasn't just a physical threat. It was a battle against forces beyond their control. As they left the library, Sir Thomas's thoughts turned to the basement once more. The woman, the strange symbols, the whispers, it was all connected. And though he had no answers, he knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The following night, Sir Thomas and Princess Charlotte prepared to return to the basement. With the new information they had uncovered, they felt they were closer to understanding what had been hidden beneath the palace for centuries. As they made their way through the darkened halls, Sir Thomas kept a sharp eye on every shadow, every flicker of movement. The air felt thick with anticipation, as though the very palace was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover the truth. When they reached the basement door, Sir Thomas hesitated for only a moment before turning the handle. The familiar, cool air of the basement rushed up to meet them, and the strange, unsettling silence greeted them once more. They stepped inside, the faint glow from the hallway casting long shadows across the room. This time, Sir Thomas felt a sense of purpose in his movements. The whispers, though faint, still lingered in the air, but he was no longer afraid. He knew now that whatever force had taken root in the palace, they could face it together. With Princess Charlotte by his side, he would protect her and uncover the truth, no matter what secrets the palace held. And so, with renewed determination, Sir Thomas and Princess Charlotte descended further into the basement, ready to confront the darkness that had haunted them both. The road ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together, with courage and strength. Because in the end, they knew that the only way to protect the kingdom, and themselves, was to unravel the mystery that lay beneath the surface.